showed speed early, and here he has shown guts. It's going to be better than 2:06, but he has held on and he has fought through over those last 10 kilometers. And there is a new men's champion at the Boston Marathon. SisayLemma, first to the tape after 26.2 miles. How about DNF 30th and number 1? Outstanding for him. Back-to-back in Boston for the magnificent HellenObiri. The bells of the South Church will toll again for Obiri, champion of the 128th Boston Marathon.
All right, everybody, that audio was courtesy of WCBB-TV, Channel 5, the ABC affiliate in Boston, also courtesy of ESPN and the BAA, the Boston Athletic Association. And that audio that you heard, of course, that was John Anderson on the call of announcing this year's Boston Marathon winners, the 128th edition of the Boston Marathon, where we had the men's winner, SisayLemma from Ethiopia, and, of course, the women's winner, back-to-back champion, HellenObiri from Kenya. To talk more about this year's marathon and also some other things being involved in the world of Boston sports, to be exact, let's welcome her back to the program. She is the co-host of the Run Farther and Faster podcast. The podcast is dedicated to the sport of running, as it features a wide range of interviews from doctors to athletes to weekend warriors, and it also provides useful information to coaches and runners of all levels. Let's welcome her back to the program, JulieSapper. Hey, Julie, how are you?
Hi, Ed. It's so nice to be back. Thanks for having me again.
You're welcome. And again, as always, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on the program. So, Julie, another Boston Marathon has come and gone. The 2024 running of the marathon was truly unique and exciting, and especially exciting because I want to start off talking about the women's winner, HellenObiri from Kenya. She is back-to-back champion in the women's race. Just give me your thoughts on Helen and her performance as she went back-to-back in the women's portion of the marathon.
Well, it was an incredible performance this year for two reasons. One is that it was incredibly hot this year, and it was an unexpected heat, so I think the conditions made the race more challenging for everyone, even someone like Obiri. And the second reason it was incredible is because she really was able to pull away, but the pack kept with her, and it was really the last 3 miles when she broke away and was able to win the race. And that took a lot of strength, especially in the heat, because the temperatures were increasing exponentially from the start until the finish. So those last 3 miles in the sun through the streets of Boston, she really made her move, was able to hold on and win the race. And it was just such an incredible accomplishment to do that 2 years in a row. And she looked so strong out there, and to be able to make a move like that during the last 3 miles of that difficult course is really, really shows her understanding of the course, her strategy, and her strength.
Absolutely, and we're going to get more into the weather situation in Boston during that time, because Boston, like a lot of big cities on the East Coast and even some in the Midwest, hit with a terrible heat wave, especially during that period of time. And, you know, I've having you on the program for quite a long time, Julie, and as well as your co-host, Lisa. You've always said the Boston Marathon is no joke, and that course is definitely difficult, and Helen was definitely able to hold her own, becoming back-to-back champion for the women's portion of the Boston Marathon. I want to move over now to the men's portion. SisayLemma out of Ethiopia, he is the men's winner of this year's Boston Marathon. EdenRainbowCooper had an opportunity to do a clean sweep. Kenya men, Kenya women, Kenya men as well as the Kenyan women, but HellenObiri wind up taking it back-to-back for the women, but Evans finished in third, but SisayLemma first place. Give me your thoughts on Sisay's performance.
I mean, he was the leader all along. He really had a blazing early pace, and the fact that he was able to win his second world major marathon victory was really something, but I mean, it really wasn't even close. It sounds like it's close on paper. He won in 2:06:17, and the second place winner, Mohammed Asa, he finished second in 2:06:58. But that's a pretty significant margin for the Boston Marathon, and he was in the lead almost the whole time. And he pursued it all the way to Boylston. And he's amazing because he also won the 2021 London Marathon. And then last year he also won the Valencia Marathon. So he is the 4th fastest marathoner in history. He looked so skilled out there. He made it look easy. He never wavered, and he basically led the whole race and made it look easy. I know it wasn't, but he really made it look easy.
Indeed, he made it look easy, and again, with that difficult course in Boston with the Bunker Hill and also just those different hills that they have in Boston is not easy, but Sisay definitely held his own, holding off Evans Chebet as well as Mohamed Asa to become the men's winner of this year's Boston Marathon. I want to talk now just about the wheelchair winners. I want to start off talking about the women's winner out of England, EdenRainbowCooper. Just give me your thoughts on Eden and her performance.
Well, Eden looked really strong. She came through. I saw her around, I think it was around mile 21. She was way in the lead, and I think she really seized an opportunity, and that's because in the days leading up to the women's wheelchair race, the defending champion, Susanna Scaroni, drew because of a shoulder injury. And so this last-minute shakeup left the competition open for a rising star, and that is EdenRainbowCooper. And she's an was at the time, now she's sponsored, I believe, unsponsored British athlete, and she had an early lead, and she held it for almost the entire race. And that's really incredible. So she definitely took an opportunity and went with it. And what's even more incredible about her performance is it was just 6 weeks after finishing second at the Tokyo Marathon. So EdenRainbowCooper is a name I think we're going to hear for years. She's a strong racer, and the fact that she was able to seize the opportunity after Scaroni had to withdraw from the race really shows her strength and her strategy. And she really obviously understood how to race this course, and she executed on that day.
All right, and congratulations to EdenRainbowCooper, who is the wheelchair winner for the women's portion of the marathon, and a gentleman that you have brought up for quite some time, Julie, and someone I guess you could say maybe he's like the Michael Jordan or the Michael Phelps or even maybe the Katie Ledecky of his respective sport. MarcelHug, again, wins another Boston Marathon representing the men's wheelchair division. Just give me your thoughts on Marcel and his continued greatness.
I mean, he had it in the bag. He pulled away from the field at the start, and he remained unchallenged for the rest of the race. Apparently, he crashed into a barrier halfway during the race. That did not impact his performance. He regrouped and shattered the course record he set last year, which is incredible. So he finished in 1:15:33, and the course record he set last year was 1:17:06. That is a significant difference. So, he had a stellar performance. No surprise there, but I think the fact that he had a hiccup and was able to still break a course record by over 2 minutes just is a testament to his ability. And again, like EdenRainbowCooper, his knowledge and strategy and how to execute the course.
All right, so again, congratulations to Marcel on again winning another Boston Marathon representing the men's wheelchair division. You know, Julie, we always have a strong American presence in this year's Boston Marathon. Well, every marathon since the running of it, there's always been a strong American presence for quite some time. I want to bring up DesLinden. You know, Des is a fixture in the running world, and certainly people were definitely rooting for her, and I know on social media, different social media platforms, hashtag Des, hashtag Go Des, and a lot of people were rooting for her. You know, she won the marathon in 2018, and it was a long time coming that an American woman had won the marathon, and she wound up finishing 16th in this year's women's portion of the race. Give me your thoughts on Des's performance.
I think Des ran an incredible race. Des is a Masters athlete now, and she is still out there competing with the very best. And just for reference, the first American was Emma Bates, and she finished 12th in 2:27:14. And Des who's much older than her, finished 16th in 2:28.57. And right between them was Sarah Hall, who placed 2:27.58, another Masters runner. So I think Des had a stellar race, and she's also a runner who's, in her words, just showing up, which means that she is someone who's not afraid to go out and give her best on the day she's given and doesn't go into a race assuming she isn't going to win it. She goes in like a champion, but isn't afraid to not be a champion. What I mean by that is she isn't looking at every race as, well, I don't know if I can win that, so I may not run it. She looks at every race as, this is an opportunity to see how I can run in these conditions, and I'm going to run to win. But if I don't win, that doesn't mean I failed. And I love that attitude as she's still out there competing so strong as a Masters runner and is continuing to do so many things for the sport as a result of that. And that is why she has such a big fan base, in my opinion. It's not because of her race times as much as it's about her performances, her grit, and her willingness to be transparent about how she approaches her racing and training. And it makes it fun to watch her, and it also makes all of us to kind of look at our running from the lens of, I'm not going to win every race. I'm not going to PR at every race I do, but by just showing up and doing the best I can on the day I'm given, that's what the sport's all about, and she embodies that.
You're absolutely right. And at the end of the day, win, lose, or draw, you always want to give it your best, and you always want to compete. And certainly Des, she brings it. And you said it best, Julie. You know, she's a champion, and, you know, she's going to try no matter the circumstances. And definitely she did try in this year's marathon, and she finished in 16th. You mentioned a couple of other American women that completed the race this year's marathon. Emma Bates, who finished in 12th. Sarah Hall, that finished in 15th. We also had Jenny Simpson, who has been a long-time fixture on the track and field scenes, particularly in marathon running, or middle and long-distance running. She finished 18th. Any thoughts that you may have on those ladies' performances?
Yeah, I'm so proud of Jenny Simpson because she ran the Olympic marathon trials, and that was actually really devastating for her. She worked so hard, and she ended up having to drop out, and it was her marathon debut because you can qualify for the U.S. Olympic marathon trials through a half marathon, which is how Jenny got in. So her very first marathon that she was supposed to finish was the Olympic trials just 2 months earlier, and she had to drop out. So how exciting for Jenny that finally she got her day. She not only finished her first marathon, the Boston Marathon, but she placed 18th in 2:31.39. Incredible performance by Jenny, and I have a feeling this won't be the last that we'll see of her on a marathon course. So I know she was so happy with her performance, as she should be. And seeing her on the course that day, she really looked happy when she was running. You could tell that she had a feeling of, I'm going to do this, I'm going to finish this. And she just looked so strong. Her form looked great. And it was really exciting to see her out there finishing her first marathon.
Absolutely, and you're right about that. That's kind of one of the beauties of marathon running. You know, it doesn't matter what age group you belong to, if you can still train and you have that desire, similar to what we talked about with DesLinden, and you still have that champion spirit, you can go out and definitely kill it and definitely, you know, make things happen. And certainly the best is definitely yet to come for Jenny Simpson. And, you know, one of the cool things I love about marathons or classics, or people do maybe a 1K or maybe do 5Ks or 10Ks or whatever, are a FinishFest. I wanted to ask you, Julie, what is a FinishFest like at the Boston Marathon?
So there really isn't a big finish fest when you finish the Boston Marathon, and that's because of the logistics. When you cross the finish line at the Boston Marathon, you are immediately given your medal, and then you're escorted through a long line of people to get to your bus, to pick up your bag that you dropped at the bus when you got on the bus to go to Hopkinton to start the race. It's really about getting your food, getting your hydration, getting your bag, and then getting out. So later that day, there is like a finish festival, but it's not at the finish line. It's a celebration, and you have to get tickets for that. And some people go, and it's a lot of fun. They used to do it over at Fenway, and I believe this year they changed the venue over to where City Hall is. But there is no finish line festival at the Boston Marathon. The festivals actually, the Fan Fest and all of the things surrounding the marathon occur before the marathon. So really it's about linking up with your loved ones or making your own plans. I know my running group, we go to a local bar after the marathon near the finish line where everybody meets up. But the goal of the BAA is to get everybody out of the finish line area as swiftly as possible because it's all about logistics and operations and safety at that point.
Understood. All things considered, what recently happened in the history of the marathon, I can totally understand, like you mentioned, with safety and logistics. Well, I'll ask you this question. Do you know what items, what food, or what type of food and beverages are served at the special festival that they have for the marathon?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. It's not really a food-focused event. I think you get drink tickets, but I don't think it's like a massive food event. I can share with you, though, what you're typically given at the finish line if you're interested when runners cross the finish line. The BAA individually packages like a little box of bag of food for people, and it typically contains, interestingly, a Hawaiian roll. So they've always been a sponsor, and they donate their rolls. So those taste pretty good after finishing the marathon. Not a lot of protein in that. In years past, there's been sometimes like chocolate milk, which is sort of a good post-run fuel, but usually it's or a granola bar. So there's usually a little bag of treats in there, but most of us aren't really dying to eat that. We'd rather go over to a local establishment and have a nice burger or something like that to refuel our glycogen stores.
All right, fair enough. Everybody has their lights and stuff, and you definitely have yours. You and your running group as well. So we talked about earlier, you mentioned about the heat wave, and we know that the East Coast and really a lot of places in the United States have been impacted by the heat wave, and certainly the East Coast, a lot of the bigger cities, Boston especially, definitely impacted by the heat wave. I wanted to ask you, Julie, what was it like dealing with that heat wave, not just in Boston, but really throughout the whole New England area, especially leading up to the marathon?
So what's tough about heat at the Boston Marathon is, of course, most people, unless you live in warmer states, you're training in the winter months. So while the heat wasn't anything unusual, it was in the high 60s by the end of the race, it was just a shock because none of the runners had acclimated yet due to winter training. So if that same weather were at the Boston Marathon this fall, it would be a lovely day because everyone would be acclimated from summer training. So I just want to clarify that that's why the weather is so tough when it's a little bit hotter, is because the sun was also brutal that day. So the impact of the temperature rising plus and not a lot of shade on the course created just a collision of heat and humidity for the runners. And generally, runners start between 10 and 11 a.m., so by the time you're in Boston finishing up the race, you're in full sun in mid-afternoon. So that's what makes it really difficult. I think for runners, the biggest challenge always with the Boston Marathon is the uncontrollable, which of course is the weather. So trying to mimic conditions in training is nearly impossible. But one thing that Lisa and I advise our runners to do is when the weather turns warmer on anomalous days in the spring, get out there and run in the middle of the day if you can and start getting adjusted to heat and humidity and keep the layers on and run in heat conditions as much as you can. Even running on a treadmill inside is getting a little bit of acclimation, but you can't totally acclimate on a day like that. So instead, on race day, the smartest thing that runners can do is to slow down their pace and run the best they can in those conditions. So times in hotter conditions are a little slower, and that's okay. It's better to control the situation by controlling your pace than allowing the weather to control you by trying to run the pace that you plan to run in cooler temperatures and then basically fading halfway through the race because you weren't able to sustain that pace due to the hotter conditions.
That's always difficult to try to visualize, as you said, do the best you can to try to put yourself in simulate a situation where you could be in a warm weather situation, but you just won't feel it until you definitely have that experience. And certainly, like you said, it was a shocker for them, and they just had to still find time to adjust to the heat wave or to that hot weather that was happening in Boston during that time. And we talked about one part of the atmosphere of this year's marathon, the heat. Well, I want to ask you, Julie, like, in your opinion, what was the atmosphere like for this year's marathon?
Oh, the atmosphere was amazing because even if the weather isn't ideal for runners, it's ideal for spectators. And so everybody was out on Marathon Monday this year because it was such a gorgeous day and it was like a big party. And people just love having the day off in Boston because, of course, the marathon's on a Monday. It's a holiday, Patriots Day. And what better way to celebrate than to get out in your neighborhood and just watch the runners and cheer for them. And it's always so entertaining, too. You see the best signs, the best fans, and it's always a great day. And the spectators are so wonderful, not just to the runners, but to each other. You see spectators helping each other find their family members and friends and cheering for each other's family members and friends. It's a great day.
Just watching it on television and just been following it for so long, it just looks like a festive day, kind of like a carnival, or maybe similar to, I guess, a Mardi Gras atmosphere from a running perspective. It definitely looks like a fun day, especially, as you said, on the holiday on Patriots Day. And while we're talking about the city of Boston, we know that the Boston Celtics have recently won the NBA championship, and we know that the Boston Marathon is the top of the top when it comes to not just culture in Boston sports, but just in the city of Boston as a whole. And we know Boston is big with the Bruins, the Patriots winning championships. But I wanted to ask you, Julie, where does the marathon rank just in terms of Boston sports, especially with the Celtics recently winning the NBA championship?
I think the difference between the Boston Celtics winning the championship and the Boston Marathon is that I don't think that they're necessarily comparable. I think the Boston Marathon is more of a community event that brings people together to spectate and party and have a great time and celebrate a sporting event, but it's really about something that is embedded in the culture of the city. You don't need a ticket to go watch the Boston Marathon. You don't even need to really be interested in the sport to go out there and just cheer on people who are, each one has a human story. And every athlete, with the exception of the few we just discussed, are amateurs. Conversely, with the Celtics, most people aren't actually going to the Celtics game. They're watching it at a bar at home, of course, because it requires tickets. And as a result, I think the community aspect of it is different. One is, of course, the Celtics is a fan-based experience, and it's in some ways embedded in the Boston culture as well. But I think the biggest difference is, while they're both sports, the Boston Marathon, to me, is more of a cultural event. It's a fun event. It's an outing, and there's no barrier to entry. There's no cost, and it's very easy to spectate from wherever you live.
Interesting right there. Thank you for that explanation right there. And we talked about the course being difficult. When I've had you and, of course, Lisa on the program, you've always talked about how difficult the course is in the Boston Marathon. I don't know if you've had experiences, whether it be running or watching other marathons, but can you tell our audience, like, what's the difference between the Boston Marathon course and, say, maybe the course at the New York City Marathon or London or Chicago?
Sure. I think the easiest comparison would be to compare Boston to Chicago, because Chicago is known to be a flat and fast course. And in optimal weather, a lot of people have their lifetime personal records set at the Chicago Marathon, and a lot of professional athletes choose to run the Chicago Marathon with the hopes of setting a PR or getting a win. The strategy of the Chicago course is just about running even, maybe doing a little bit of a negative split, but there isn't a lot of change in the course terrain, and basically you train to run a marathon pace, and your strategy is to just not go out too fast, but to maintain that pace. Conversely, the Boston Marathon, the first 16 miles of the race is a net downhill experience. So it actually feels pretty easy, the first 16 miles, and pleasant. And the mistake that a lot of runners make is that they go out too fast, because your marathon pace that you've practiced feels really easy when you're going downhill. So when they go out too fast, they run out of gas sooner. And as a result, when they start hitting these hills in Newton around mile 16, 16. It's pretty jarring. So the strategy to run the Boston Marathon is you have to think of the marathon as a 20-mile warm-up, and then the 6.2, the last part of the marathon, is the actual race. And in order to race that last 6.2, you actually need to strategically run a little bit conservatively for the first 16, so you don't trash your quads running too fast downhill so that you have nothing left in the tank when you hit the hills in Newton. Once you crest Heartbreak Hill at mile 21, which is the end of Newton, the last 5.2 miles of the race is really forgiving and a little bit of downhill and a little bit of flat, and you can really take advantage of that if your quads aren't trashed and start passing people. So patience is really important to execute a great Boston Marathon, and you see that a lot with the elites. You see that the race doesn't actually start for a lot of the elite runners until after they crest Heartbreak Hill, and that's when a lot of them make their moves. The ones who start out too fast and lead unabashedly without thinking about their quads and what they have left when they hit mile 16 generally are the people that you're passing around mile 17.
Wow, you've always said it that it's the Boston Marathon is always a tough course, and each time you explain it, man, it's just definitely, it doesn't matter if you're in tip-top shape. You just definitely have to be prepared for the long haul, especially those difficult hills, such as you mentioned, crossing Newton. And just Boston, just geographically, the way it's built, definitely no joke, if you're in tip-top shape. So definitely, thank you for explaining that. And it was awesome. And you heard it from her. She is JulieSapper. She is the co-host of the Run Farther and Faster podcast. The podcast is dedicated to the sport of running, as it features interviews from doctors to athletes to weekend warriors, and it also gives cool information to coaches and runners of all levels. Again, Julie, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the program. Tell everybody where they can find you, as well as Lisa, on social media, any websites. Let the listeners know that as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me again, Ed. It's always a treat to talk with you. You can find us on Instagram at Run Farther and Faster, on Facebook at Run Farther and Faster. Our website is runfartherandfaster.com. Our Twitter is Run Farther Fast, and you can also find our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. So we look forward to speaking with you again, hopefully next year, about the Boston Marathon. But thank you always for having us on, Ed. It's always a treat to speak with you.
Absolutely. It's always a treat having you back on, as well as Lisa as well, and just informing me and also the listeners out there just about the cool things about the Boston Marathon. Definitely never a dull moment. And again, she's JulieSapper, co-host of the Run Farther and Faster podcast. Julie, as always, again, thank you so much. And if ever you want to come back on, feel free to let us know.
Okay. Take care, Ed. Thanks. Bye.
You're welcome. And until next time, everybody, have a good one and be safe.
He showed speed early, and here he has shown guts. It's going to be better than 2:06, but he has held on, and he has fought through over those last 10 kilometers, and there is a new men's champion at the Boston Marathon. SisayLemma, first to the tape after 26.2 miles. How about DNF 30th and number 1? Outstanding for him. Back-to-back in Boston for the magnificent HellenObiri. The bells of the South Church will toll again for Obiri, champion of the 128th Boston Marathon.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the channel. Remember to click like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for watching.